Children vanish in the night, their cries echoing through empty chambers while their parents weep tears of gold. Ancient gods demand payment in blood and bone, spinning mortal souls into threads of destiny. This is not the sanitized fairy tale you remember from childhood. This is the brutal truth buried beneath 3 millennia of storytelling, where divine beings once walked among mortals, offering impossible gifts for unspeakable prices. The story of Rumpelstiltskin is not a children's tale. It is a memory fragment of humanity's darkest bargains, preserved in the amber of folklore. Hidden within its familiar verses lie echoes of Bronze Age rituals, divine metallurgy, and the terrifying power of speaking sacred names. When you understand what this story truly remembers, you will never sleep peacefully again. Welcome back, Darklings. Today we descend into the shadows of a tale that has haunted humanity for 35 centuries. The miller's daughter, spinning straw into gold, was never about magic tricks or clever riddles. It was about something far more sinister, something that our ancestors feared to speak aloud. They encoded their terror into bedtime stories, hoping future generations would remember the warning without understanding the horror. But the horror remembers us. Chapter 1. The Blood-Soaked Origins. Around 3500 BCE, humans witnessed something that would forever change their understanding of the possible. In primitive forges, copper and tin fused into bronze, creating tools that could reshape civilization. To terrified villagers, this was divine magic. The metalworkers were not craftsmen, but beings touched by supernatural power. These early metallurgists lived apart from society, shrouded in mystery. They spoke technical languages that sounded like incantations. They worked with fire and molten metal, emerging covered in soot, their eyes gleaming with otherworldly knowledge. To the Bronze Age mind, they were not human. The Book of Enoch tells us what our ancestors believed these beings were. Divine entities called the Watchers descended from heaven and taught humanity forbidden arts, including metalworking. These were rebels against divine order, sharing knowledge mortals were never meant to possess. The biblical Tubal-Cain, forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, appears in Cain's lineage. Ancient texts consistently associate metallurgy with divine transgression, with knowledge stolen from gods at terrible cost. Across cultures, this pattern repeats. Sumerian Kotharwakasis worked in divine forges. The Hittites spoke of Hazamili, laboring behind steam and fire. Norse dwarves crafted Thor's hammer underground. The Slavs revered Svarog, god of fire and metalworking. These figures share characteristics: elusive, never fully human, speaking in riddles, working in isolation. They appear when needed and vanish mysteriously. They demand terrible prices involving the sacrifice of what mortals hold most dear. Archaeological evidence supports these accounts disturbingly. Excavations at metalworking sites reveal infant remains buried beneath forge floors, bones charred and broken. These were deliberate sacrifices to ensure divine craft success. In Carthage, the Tophet cemetery contains thousands of urns with cremated children's remains. These were sacrifices to Moloch, god of fire and metalworking. Romans found the practice appalling. Metalworkers were seen as intermediaries between human and divine realms, transforming the mundane into sacred. But this power demanded prices paid in blood, extracted from the innocent. Rumpelstiltskin's true nature becomes clear through this lens. He is not a fairy tale character, but a memory fragment of ancient divine craftsmen. His ability to spin straw into gold represents metallurgy, transformed by oral tradition into something palatable for children. The essential horror remains: the demand for the firstborn child, otherworldly knowledge, mysterious disappearance when his name is spoken. These echo real beliefs about beings who once walked among humanity, offering impossible gifts for unthinkable prices. Chapter 2. The Language of Gods. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was power. Ancient peoples believed certain words could bind demons, summon gods, and reshape reality itself. This was the language of creation, and those who spoke it were feared above all others. The Testament of Solomon provides the most disturbing example. This forbidden manuscript claims Solomon built his temple not through human labor alone, but by summoning demons with a divine ring. He would call forth entities and ask, "What is your name?" Once he possessed their true names, he could command them absolutely. This reflected ancient magical practices that were real and dangerous. Across the world, priest-magicians engaged in rituals to compel divine beings through their names. These were not prayers, but acts of spiritual warfare, battles fought with syllables and secret words. Egyptian pharaohs possessed secret names protecting their souls in the afterlife. These names were carved into tombs and temples, whispered by priests in pyramid depths. Without these names, pharaohs would be erased from existence itself. In Kabbalah, God's names are fundamental forces of creation. The Tetragrammaton is so sacred it cannot be spoken aloud. Scribes who wrote these letters purified themselves through ritual baths. Some buried their pens afterward, believing the tools had become too sacred for ordinary use. Ancient Indo-European tradition reveals the most disturbing aspect of divine speech. Gods and spirits do not communicate like humans. They sing, they chant, their words follow rhythms and patterns like riddles that mortal minds cannot grasp. In every Rumpelstiltskin version, the helper's name is revealed through song or chant. The messenger discovers him dancing around a fire, singing his secret name in rhythmic verse. This echoes how divine beings were believed to communicate through sacred songs holding the power to create and destroy. The names themselves are significant. Rumpelstiltskin means little rattle silt, emphasizing his otherworldly nature. Across cultures, the supernatural helper's name is always alien, never quite human, suggesting origins beyond mortal understanding. Welsh versions call him Gwrwynethrat. Hungarian tradition names him Pansamansi. Scottish tales use Whuppity Sturi. These names share characteristics: difficult pronunciation, archaic sound, elements suggesting mechanical or ritualistic actions. Linguistic analysis reveals many names contain elements from ancient religious languages. They incorporate syllables from sacred texts, invocations to forgotten gods, technical terminology of metallurgy and alchemy. They are corrupted fragments of older, more dangerous words. Speaking a being's true name was equivalent to accessing their spiritual source code. This is why the supernatural helper is not destroyed by violence, but defeated by naming. When the queen speaks Rumpelstiltskin, she performs spiritual warfare using humanity's most ancient weapon, the word itself. Ancient grimoires, magical texts used by medieval sorcerers, contain lists of demonic names and pronunciation methods. These are practical manuals for spiritual combat, not theoretical exercises. The Queen's victory represents humanity's triumph over the divine through mastery of sacred speech. But victory comes with a price. Once you speak the name, you become part of a tradition stretching back to human consciousness dawn. You become a practitioner of the oldest art, compelling gods through their names. Chapter 3. Spinning the Threads of Fate. In ancient temples, priestesses worked at spinning wheels that determined the fate of nations. These were not ordinary craftswomen, but servants of cosmic forces, their hands moving with the fundamental patterns of existence itself. What they spun was not thread, but destiny, and what they wove was reality's very fabric. Spinning has haunted human consciousness since recorded history began. It appears in every culture, every mythology, always carrying the same meaning. Transformation of raw material into something greater, creation of order from chaos, the binding of fate itself. Greek mythology places the three fates at existence's center, their wheels turning endlessly. Clotho spins life's thread. Lachesis measures its length. Atropos cuts it at death's moment. These are not gentle old women, but cosmic forces whose work shapes gods and mortals' destiny. Their craft descriptions are disturbing in precision. The thread has different textures and colors representing different lives and deaths. Golden thread indicates divine favor. Dark thread suggests suffering. Silver thread represents those touched by otherworldly power. Their spinning sound is not gentle domestic whirring, but something deeper, rhythmic, like the universe's heartbeat. Norse mythology presents an even more terrifying vision. The Norns sit at Yggdrasil's roots, spinning not just individual fates, but all existence's destiny. Their names represent past, present, and future, the three-time aspects they weave into reality's pattern. The Norns work with impossible materials, threads of starlight, fibers from God's breath, strands from the dead's dreams. Their wheel is not wood and metal, but something crafted from first giants' bones, powered by the world's rotation itself. Hindu tradition reaches its most sophisticated expression. The universe is described as a vast golden tapestry woven by divine forces on a cosmic loom. Vedic texts speak of golden threads stretching across heavens, binding all existence in patterns too complex for mortal comprehension. The golden thread motif appears disturbingly across cultures. Egyptian god Ta spoke creation into existence, but his words became golden threads weaving themselves into the world's fabric. Celtic mythology describes the otherworld connected to our reality by golden threads. When examining Rumpelstiltskin through this lens, his craft's true horror becomes apparent. He is not simply creating gold from straw, but manipulating existence's fundamental forces. Straw represents life's raw potential, while gold represents divine essence, the sacred material from which fate itself is woven. His process is not craftsmanship, but cosmic surgery. He takes mortal existence's mundane matter and transforms it into something belonging to the god's realm. This is why his work must be secret, only at night, requiring terrible payment. He violates natural laws, performing acts mortals were never meant to witness. The spinning wheel takes on sinister significance. It is not a tool, but a gateway connecting the mortal realm to cosmic forces governing existence. The wheel's rhythmic motion mirrors eternal cycles of creation and destruction, fate's endless dance shaping all reality. Alchemical tradition sees spinning base metals into gold as ultimate transformation, matter's perfection through divine knowledge. Medieval alchemists understood this process was not merely physical, but spiritual. They transformed not just lead into gold, but their own souls, achieving divine consciousness with terrible risks. The most disturbing aspect is spinning's connection to time itself. Ancient belief systems saw time not as linear, but cyclical, an endless spiral of creation and destruction. The spinning wheel represents this eternal cycle, fate's endless turning bringing all things to appointed ends. When Rumpelstiltskin spins straw into gold, he manipulates time itself. He accelerates natural processes that would eventually transform base matter into precious substance, compressing cosmic evolution eons into a single night. This explains his work's exhausting nature, his terrible payment demands, his limited performances. The implications are staggering. If these traditions reflect real beliefs about real forces, then spinning becomes not just domestic craft, but cosmic manipulation. The spinning wheel becomes not just a tool, but a gateway to powers mortals were never meant to possess. Chapter 4. The Price of Divine Knowledge. In Carthage's charred ruins, archaeologists uncovered something that should make us question every children's story. Beneath ash and bone layers, they found the Tophet, a cemetery containing thousands of urns filled with cremated children's remains. These were not war or disease victims, but deliberate sacrifices, offerings to gods demanding the ultimate price for divine gifts. The practice was systematic, widespread, challenging our assumptions about ancient spirituality. These were not isolated madness acts, but organized religious rituals performed by entire communities believing certain divine knowledge could only be purchased with innocent lives. Moloch received these offerings, a deity associated with fire, metalworking, and matter transformation. Carthaginian texts describe him granting impossible wishes, transforming ordinary into extraordinary, spinning base metals into gold. But his gifts demanded prices even hardened Roman soldiers found appalling. The ritual was conducted with terrifying precision. Infants were placed in Moloch's bronze arms, heated until glowing red-hot. Children's cries were drowned by drums and flutes, their suffering hidden behind sacred music. Parents offering their children were not monsters but desperate people seeking divine intervention during crisis. This pattern repeats across the ancient world disturbingly. In the Levant, archaeologists uncovered foundation deposits containing children's remains buried beneath temples and palaces. These were ritual offerings ensuring divine craftsmanship success. Abraham and Isaac's biblical account provides the most famous example. God's command to sacrifice Isaac is not presented as aberration, but as faith test, demonstrating the ultimate price divine knowledge demands. The ram substitution suggests such sacrifices were common enough, requiring divine intervention to prevent them. Metallurgy and transformation connections are consistent across cultures. Hittite god Hazemili received child sacrifices for superior bronze working techniques. Norse traditions speak of children sacrificed, ensuring metalworking success. Even in distant Mesoamerica, Aztec god Tlaloc received child sacrifices guaranteeing divine craftsmanship success. Victim age is significant. These were not warriors or criminals, but innocent children, often firstborn offspring representing family futures. The ancient mind understood true divine knowledge required sacrificing what was most precious, irreplaceable, beloved. This context transforms our understanding of Rumpelstiltskin's demand. When he asks for the queen's firstborn child, he follows the most ancient and universal divine transaction pattern. He demands traditional payment for supernatural knowledge, the price gods have always required for impossible gifts. The queen's horror reflects not just maternal instinct but cultural memory. Some part recognizes the bargain's nature. Understand she has entered transactions following rules older than human law. She has received divine knowledge, and the price has always been the same. Ancient peoples lived in constant awareness that divine knowledge came with terrible costs. They understood certain power forms could only be obtained through sacrifice, that gods demanded payment in blood and suffering. This knowledge created deep ambivalence towards supernatural help. People desperately wanted divine intervention, but feared the price such intervention would demand. They sought supernatural beings' help while simultaneously dreading payment moments. Folklore traditions preserve this ambivalence disturbingly. In countless tales, supernatural helpers offer impossible solutions to desperate problems, but gifts always come with hidden costs. The helpful shoemaker, elves demand offerings escalating in severity. The fairy godmother's magic has time limits and dangerous side effects. The pattern suggests these stories are not just entertainment, but educational tools, warnings passed down through generations about divine transactions' true nature. They teach supernatural help always comes with prices, that gods and spirits operate according to rules fundamentally hostile to human welfare. The Rumpelstiltskin tale specifically prepares children for the possibility that help might come from sources not entirely benevolent. It teaches supernatural assistance always comes with costs, that beings offering impossible gifts are not to be trusted. The Queen's victory over Rumpelstiltskin represents humanity's triumph over these ancient spiritual extortion systems. By learning his true name, she gains power over him, reverses the traditional relationship between mortal and divine. But victory comes only after demonstrating willingness to pay the ultimate price. The tale's ending is more disturbing than comforting. Rumpelstiltskin is defeated but not destroyed. He tears himself in half or sinks into earth. But these are not deaths but transformations. He becomes something else, continuing to exist in human consciousness shadows. If these stories reflect real beliefs about real beings, then supernatural helpers are still among us, still offering impossible gifts for terrible prices. They wait in human experience margins, ready to appear when desperation peaks, ready to make the same ancient bargains haunting humanity for millennia, would be required. The folklore traditions preserve this ambivalence in disturbing detail. In countless tales, supernatural helpers appear to offer impossible solutions to desperate problems, but their gifts always come with hidden costs. The helpful shoemaker, elves demand offerings that gradually escalate in severity. The fairy godmother's magic has time limits and dangerous side effects. The jinn's wishes are granted in ways that bring more suffering than joy. The pattern is so consistent that it suggests these stories are not just entertainment, but educational tools, warnings passed down through generations about the true nature of divine transactions. They teach that supernatural help always comes with a price, that gods and spirits operate according to rules that are fundamentally hostile to human welfare. Modern psychology has identified this pattern as the monkey's paw phenomenon, named after the famous horror story in which wishes are granted in ways that bring disaster. But the psychological concept fails to capture the full horror of the ancient belief system. Our ancestors did not see these as cautionary tales, but as practical guides to real spiritual dangers. The preservation of these warnings in children's stories is particularly disturbing. Fairy tales are often our first introduction to concepts of good and evil, justice and injustice, safety and danger.